Welcome to Drive the Daf, clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Shabbos Daf Kuf Vav contains 3 Mishnayos. From the beginning of the Daf until the first Mishnah is a discussion about Kilkulin. It's about when a malacha that you do on Shabbos, which is for a destructive purpose, could that be an Isser D'Oraisa or not? Are there any exceptions to the general rule which we've seen that malachas have to be for constructive purpose? Then the first Mishnah introduces the halachos of tzad, trapping or hunting, and the next 2 Mishnayos continue it. The last 2 Mishnayos actually are all the way at the end of the daf. There's just one sentence of Gemara between them, and the last Mishnah ends the daf. So let's begin. The first one, we are discussing the Shabbos act of destructive malachas. We had seen in the Mishnah earlier on Daf Kuf Hey that every malacha d'oraisa, to be able to be in violation of an Isser D'Oraisa, it has to be a constructive act. If it's purely destructive, it can't be an Isser D'Oraisa, it can only be an Isser D'Rabbanan. The problem is that there's a Mishnah in Maseches Beitza that says that if somebody injures somebody on Shabbos, he draws blood, that's a malacha d'oraisa, he doesn't have to pay, because since he is held guilty for violating Shabbos, that's Kimli Min Rabbeinu, that's the bigger punishment, he doesn't have to make good on the smaller one. And same thing applies if he sets fire to somebody's things. Again, he's being Mechal Shabbos D'Oraisa, so he doesn't need to pay. So this Mishnah clearly says that injuring someone, drawing blood, and burning something are both Isurei D'Oraisa. The problem is those are purely destructive. So how could our Mishnah here say that they're not destructive? So we have 2 explanations to this. Rabbi Avo says he has a brisa that explains the contradiction between these 2 Mishnayos, and the brisa says that these 2 malachas are exceptions. These are 2 malachas that are purely destructive, but they're exception to the rule, and they're an Isser D'Oraisa anyway. Rabbi Yechanan says no, it's not true. These are not exceptions at all. These are talking about cases in which they were done constructively. He injured somebody because he needs the blood. He wants to use the blood to feed a dog or something. And when he set fire to it, he needs ash. He needs to make coal, whatever it is that he needs. So it's constructive. If, however, somebody would do injuring and creating a fire destructively, it would not be an Isser D'Oraisa at all. So now the Gemara says, according to Rabbi Avo and his brisa, who says that's an exception, what are you going to do? Our Mishnah said clearly there's no exceptions. It said this is the rule. The rule is that anything which is destructive is not an Isser D'Oraisa. It doesn't sound like it's allowing for exceptions. That contradicts this brisa that says that these 2 are exceptions. So Gemara says an interesting thing. The Gemara says Rabbi Avo will tell you it's a machlokes between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda whether there are exceptions or not. Our Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda who says that there are no exceptions. We had the Mishnah that said that chayvel, causing a wound and setting fire, is an Isser D'Oraisa. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, that's fine. It could be an Isser D'Oraisa if it's constructive. Why? The problem is like this. When you're doing something for a funny reason, that's a malacha she'ein tzricha l'gufa. That's you doing something for the wrong reason. You're drawing blood not to hurt the guy, but in order to use the blood. That's malacha she'ein tzricha l'gufa. And to set fire in order to make ash is also malacha she'ein tzricha l'gufa. So according to Rabbi Shimon, every malacha she'ein tzricha l'gufa is not an Isser D'Oraisa at all. Well, destructive or not destructive is not even the issue. It's malacha she'ein tzricha l'gufa. It can't be an Isser D'Oraisa. Therefore, they couldn't possibly tell me that these 2 cases are constructive, and therefore it's an Isser D'Oraisa. If it's constructive, it's malacha she'ein tzricha l'gufa. It's not an Isser D'Oraisa anyway. So according to Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Avo will tell you it has to be that these 2 are an exception. And even though they are destructive, it's an Isser D'Oraisa anyway. And that's the brisa that Rabbi Avo brings. The Mishnah, our Mishnah, would say there's a general rule and there's no exceptions. That's Rabbi Yehuda. He says that Mishnah in Beis is talking about where you did these 2 things constructively. And since it's, even though it's malacha she'ein tzricha l'gufa, it's not a problem because Rabbi Yehuda holds the malacha she'ein tzricha l'gufa can be an Isser D'Oraisa anyway. That's how the Gemara resolves that. Now the Gemara says Rabbi Shimon, who holds that these 2 are exceptions, needs a source. Where are you going to know? What's the source for this idea that there are 2 exceptions to the rule? That wounding and setting fire are exceptions. So the Gemara says Rabbi Shimon has psukim. He has a proof from psukim that wounding and setting fire are Isur D'Oraisa, even though they have to be destructive. What's the proof? As far as wounding, we have a specific drasha from an expert B'Yoim that to do a bris milah on Shabbos is permitted. Obviously, if it's permitted only because it's a bris milah, then ordinarily wounding is an Isser D'Oraisa. Now, the proof that setting fire is an Isser D'Oraisa is because the punishment using fire for certain types of averos, like for a vas koyin, that is specifically permitted to do. That is specifically forbidden to do on Shabbos. So you see that it's an Isser D'Oraisa to do any type of burning on Shabbos. So that's where we know that these two exceptions exist. And the Gemara asks now, so what's Rabbi Yehuda going to do? Rabbi Yehuda says there are no exceptions, but those are clearly forbidden midairaisa. So the Gemara says Rabbi Yehuda will again tell you that's not destructive. Those are constructive purposes. A bris milah, what could be more constructive than that? You're taking a child and bringing him into the bris of Avram Avinu. You're fixing him up completely. You're making him the way he's supposed to be. And melting the lead to do the misa of sreifa that's also a constructive thing. You need to be able to use that. You're creating something that you need to use. You need molten lead. The same thing, it's just the same as what they did in the Mishkan, where they boiled things up in order to make ink. It's the same kind of thing, and therefore it's constructive just as much as that is. Okay, that's the end of the discussion here. The Gemara now has one line about the measurement. We had said that the length of thread for which one is in violation of an Isser D'Oraisa if he bleaches or colors it is twice the size of the space between a man's index finger and middle finger. Rav Yosef said it that way, it's twice that space. Rav Chia bar Ami said it's 1 times the space between the end of the thumb and the forefinger when you spread them. So if you actually try to measure this between the tips of the thumb and the forefinger when they're spread as far as they go, is pretty much twice the length of between the forefinger and between the index finger and the middle finger. Okay, now we go to the next Mishnah, which discusses the halach of tzad, trapping. Now, what we need to know about trapping is as follows. Anytime an animal is in a situation where it can be easily grabbed, that's called trapped. So if you take it from not being grabbable and you put it in that situation, that's the malacha of trapping. Trapping is, again, defined as taking an animal from a situation in which you can't catch it easily and putting it in a situation where you could catch it easily, you just need to go over and hold on to it. Now, if it is in that situation already and you trap it further, that would not be an Isser D'Oraisa of trapping because it was already trapped. Okay, so to go from free to trapped is an Isser D'Oraisa, and therefore we need to be able to define what is called trapped. How do you define trapped? So that's what this Mishnah is about. So as far as when a bird is trapped if it's in a storeroom. Storeroom is windowless. If you can get a bird into that room, that's the malacha d'oraisa of trapping. If you bring a bird into a house, that's not a malacha because houses have windows, and windows in those days didn't have glass, and therefore the bird could just fly out. It's not called trapped. It's still free. Now, what about a deer? So if you bring a deer into a house, it's definitely trapped. Okay, in the house is called trapped. There's a machlokes if you bring it into a fenced-in area. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it's not called trapped. According to Chachamim, if you bring it into a garden or a yard or a biber, which is a corral, like a large fenced-in area, then that is called trapped for a deer, and that is the malacha d'oraisa. The Gemara now says, Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says, not every biber is the same. It depends on the size, depends on the shape. In some situations, the deer is easy to grab, in some it's not. Depends on the enclosure. And then the Gemara gives a general rule: anything which is brought into a situation where it's now called caught is an Isser D'Oraisa, but if you still have to go right after it and grab it, that's not the Isser D'Oraisa yet. Gemara now begins. First of all, the Gemara will have a contradiction between two Mishnayos, and the Gemara will try to resolve it. The Gemara will have 4 possible, 2 resolutions, and one is divided into 3 parts. And then the Gemara will define for us different types of animals, or animals in different conditions, when they are called already caught and when they are not called caught. So again, the issue of when an animal is called caught has 2 halachas. First of all, you're not allowed to put it into that situation. That would be an Isser D'Oraisa. And if it's already in that situation, and then you go grab it more, you haven't done an Isser D'Oraisa because it was already caught beforehand. So we have 2 Mishnayos discussing fish, birds, and animals. As far as fish goes, it says a fish that's in an enclosed pond of some sort, you're not allowed to catch it further. That's for sure. However, as far as the bird and the animal, so if it's in an enclosure of some sort, so one Mishnah says you're allowed to go grab it because it's already called caught, and the other one says that it's not called caught. It would be Isser D'Oraisa if you went and grabbed it. So the question is, how are we going to understand this? A bird in an enclosure of sorts, or a chaya, a wild animal in an enclosure. Is that called court or not? So the Gemara first wants to say, as far as animals and animals, we could blame that on the Machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim, which we just saw in the Mishnah. They argued over a deer in a pen, in a corral, so it could be that one of these Mishnayos is Rabbi Yehuda says that is gold caught, and one of it is the Rabbanan would say that it's not gold caught. But about birds, we didn't see any difference between birds. Everybody agreed as far as birds that even in a house it's not cold caught. So what is this Mishnah referring to when it says that in an enclosure it is cold caught? So the Gemara says, maybe you want to tell me that the difference between the two Mishnayos are one has a roof, one is without a roof. So the Gemara says, what do you mean? But even in a house, we said all opinions agree that even in a house which has a roof, it's not cold caught. So the Gemara says it's two types of birds. There's a bird called Itzipur Duror, where the modern Hebrew word Duror means free, from Bukarasim Duror, but this is not defined that way. Here, this is defined as a kind of a bird which is familiar with houses, and therefore it's not impressed by the fact that it's in a house, and it still knows how to escape. It still flies around from corner to corner, and you can't catch it easily, and therefore it's not called caught. Other types of birds, however, in a house are called caught. They're easy to get their hands on. Now, the Gemara says, once you say that, once we're fitting everything in, and we're differentiating between the situations, then I don't have to say that the two Mishnayos, as far as the wild animal, that one's Rabbi Yehuda and one's a Chachamim, I could fit them both into the Chachamim. I could say that it depends on the size of the enclosure. One, if it's a very small enclosure, then the animal is caught. If it's a big enclosure, then the animal is not caught. Even the Rabbanan would agree to that. Now the Gemara says, how do you define a small enclosure versus a big enclosure? The Gemara has three versions of how you define this. So the Gemara says, Rav Ashi says that if you can grab the animal in one lunge, it's called caught. If you have to chase around, it's not called caught, and therefore that's a big enclosure and a small enclosure. Or a small enclosure is where the shade from the two walls reach each other. I don't know if that means at the same time, because the sun is shining from opposite directions, so how would the shade reach each other? And the third way of defining it is a small enclosure is one that has a lot of corners. If there's corners, it's easy to trap the animal, where there are no corners, so the animal can't hide. But if there are lots of corners, then it's called a large enclosure. I guess the animal can hide in the corner. Okay, now the Gemara mentions Rav Shimon ben Gamliel at the end, who said that it varies from case to case and from enclosure to enclosure. So the Gemara says, Rav Yosef says in the name of Rav Yehuda and Rav Shmuel that's the halacha. The halacha is like that thing that Rav Shimon Gamliel said. And Abaye asks right away, said, based on what we just said to answer the kasha before, everybody holds that way. We've just said we're differentiating within the opinion of the Chachamim, depends what the closure is like. So everybody agrees. So what do you need to tell me that halacha is like him if nobody argues? So the Moses, he said to him, he said, okay, so what do you care? That's the halacha. Who cares if someone argues or not? So he was upset with him. He said, what are you trying to teach me songs here? We're not learning things I don't need to know. If there is no reason to say that, then there's no reason for it to be said. It shouldn't be said. The Gemara now brings a series of brises to help us define what types of animals the malacha of tzeda trapping applies to. And first we're going to discuss birds in different conditions, or deer in different conditions, and then we'll discuss different types of creatures. So first of all, as far as a deer, so the Gemara says if it's blind or sleeping and you catch it, that is called trapping. It wasn't called trapped while it was blind or asleep, and you went and trapped it. If, however, it is lame, old, or sick, that's not an Isser D'Oraisa of the trapping, because it was already called trapped beforehand. It's still Isser D'Rabbanan because you're limiting its range of movement further, but it's not Isser D'Oraisa. So the Gemara says, Abaye asked Rav Yosef, what's the difference? So he said, because when it's blind or sleeping, it still usually can escape. It can still sense your approach, and it can still escape. Therefore, it's your job to catch it. If, however, it is lame, old, or sick, then it can't escape. Now the Gemara has a contradiction. We have a brayso also where that says that if it is sick, it is an Isser. But the Raisa here was saying it's not. The Gemara says, Rav Shesha says it depends what the sickness is. If it just has a fever, so then it can still escape. If it's very exhausted and can barely move, so then it's not an Isser D'Oraisa, it's called trapped already. Next brayso discusses different species. It says somebody who traps grasshoppers, Gazin, which is a machlokes rishonim whether it's a type of bee or wasp, or if it's a type of kosher grasshopper. Or he traps wasps, or he traps mosquitoes, any of these things that you trap on Shabbos. It's a machlokes Rameir and the Chachamim. Rabbi Meir says it's Isser Deraisa. So the Chachamim say it's only usher if it's something which people usually trap, which means that they trap it because they want to have it. Now they want to get rid of it, they want to have it, perhaps they want to eat it. Anything which you're not going to eat, you don't need, that's no Isser Deraisa of trapping. Now, next Brisa discusses grasshoppers in different circumstances. It says it depends what the weather is. If there's dew out, so the grasshoppers are blinded and it's easy to catch them, that's not Isser Deraisa. If, however, it's hot and dry, then it is an Isser Deraisa. And Elazar ben Mahavai says that if there's hordes of grasshoppers coming, it's not an Isser Deraisa, because you don't have to work hard to catch one. You just reach out and grab one. Whichever one you get, but you're going to get something. So Gemara says, what's he referring to? When there's dew out or when it's dry out? So the Gemara has a brisa which says clearly he's referring to when there is dry out and it's hard to catch them, but if there's hordes of them and you catch them, then it is an Isser Deraisa. Okay, now we get to the next Mishnah, one line of Gemara, and then another Mishnah. So the two Mishnayos both discuss the halacha when two people shared in the accomplishment of the trapping, who violates the Isser, as we have seen earlier. It's a machlokes, but usually it's only an Isser Deraisa when you needed both of them to do it. If two people shared a one-man job, then it's not an Isser Deraisa. Rabbi Shimon argues on that. He had a different sheet that we saw this earlier on Daf Tzadi Beis. Okay, so the Mishnah first of all says that if a deer wanders into a house and somebody shuts the door, that's an Isser Deraisa, he just trapped it. If two people shut the door, so neither of them have an Isser Deraisa. Shutting the door is a one-man job. Unless, of course, it's a big heavy door, it's a two-man job to shut, then it's an Isser Deraisa, except according to Rabbi Shimon, who says that's not an Isser Deraisa. Now, the Gemara says, Rabbi Yirmiyah Barabba named Shmuel says, if you catch a lion, good luck. It's not called caught. Not called caught until you stick him in a metal cage. Until then, he can still escape. Okay, next Mishnah. If somebody sits in a doorway, and he blocks the doorway so that it's mostly closed, but not fully closed, and the animal can still escape, so it's no Isser yet. A second person comes and sits in the rest of the doorway, now it's blocked, he's the one who did the Isser, not the first one, because he's the one who took it from open to closed. If, however, the first person fills the doorway completely, and the second person comes and he stands right behind him, and so that there's two layers of filling to the doorway, and then the first guy leaves. So the second person didn't do anything wrong, even though now he's the only person filling the doorway, but it was the animal was already trapped. What's it like? It's like if there's an animal that's already caught in a house and the door is already shut, and this guy comes and he keeps the door shut. Okay, that's not catching the animal. Even if you lock the door, you didn't catch the animal's already caught. All you're doing is not releasing it. That's not an Isser of catching it on Shabbos. Okay, this will end the Mishnah, also end Daf Kuf Vav. Now we'll get to Daf Kuf Zayin tomorrow, which will end.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethe.daf@gmail.com.